Good morning, hail and welcome. I am Wayman Grimraven, Hailey Gwaidman of Woden's Earth, the Ancestral Hall, coming to you today from the Heath of Scaifer in the West Thirding of Yorkshire, in Wackersfeld. For those who don't understand that, that's in Wakefield in West Yorkshire. Okay, carrying on with our regular Monasdag posts. Today we are going to continue speaking of Woden, Odin, Wotan, who do you call him? It's up to you. But starting to slightly digress a little bit, as we could just go on and talk about Woden forever. He's such a complex character, and that's not just what this channel is for. I just will point out that one of the comments last week, obviously about our Mike, we've also got our Shannon here. They're two of our kinsfolk who have gone to sleep with the ancestors over the last few years. Both very missed, but very well honoured within the kindred as well. So a shout out to them. Today I'm going to look at a couple or so of the stories, the mythologies surrounding Woden. Black coffee, guys, you know what it's like on work days. That's strong, that's good. I have a couple of books I'm going to highly recommend for some of the subject matter if you wish as an individual to go and further your exploration down there. Again, I've had my little early morning bloating here to Woden. Okay then, the first subject I can mention is the Well of Mimir, or Mim's Well. Okay, Mim was one of the hostages. This is in Norse mythology, not in Saxon, but they do tie in. They're all his ancestors. Okay, basically he was sent as an hostage when Frey and his father Njord was brought over to the Asia to end the war. Right, Mim was extremely clever, which really miffed off the Vanir for whatever reason, and they decided to lop off his head. Hence, that would have been enough to start a war. But rather than that, Woden, in his wisdom, collects Mim's head, surrounds it with runes, and basically puts life back into the head and can speak with the head and ask advice from the head. But there's a cost, and the cost is some form of sacrifice, and why not? Mim's given up his life, probably not willingly, to become Woden's oracle, if you like. So, one of the big stories about Mim's Well is obviously when Woden goes to ask for a look into the Well of Knowledge. Now, to me, that's a representation of the universe. There's universal knowledge out there on a spiritual level that we can tap into by looking at the Well of Mim. But our sacrifice at this point, it'd be time, wouldn't it? To be fair, as he put the time and effort in, whereas Woden, as a god, is asked to sacrifice an eye, and without thinking, he plucks out the eye and throws it into the Well of Mim. Some pictures show the right eye, some pictures show the left. To me, it's his left eye. I'm not going to go into explanations for that. You need to make your own mind up what you think about that. But to me, it's his left eye that is left, because it's part of the left-hand path theory in my mind. And there's a couple of times that these things are attested elsewhere. If you look in Velospar, the Vola's sayings, which starts the Havamal, the Eddas, not just Havamal, and she says, "I know where you hid your eye, Odin," right? So under the tree. So that's a clear attestation that this is supposed to have been something that Woden did, and hence can look into this vast well of knowledge, which again makes it kind of hard to understand why he's not classed as the all-knowing after all his sacrifices, but there you go. Okay, So that straight away is one of his sacrifices. I'm not going to go back over the hanging on the tree again. Yeah, okay. Everyone, if you don't know that one, you need to go and read it. It's one of the main focuses of Woden. But the well of poetry, sometimes it's overlooked a little bit. There's a lot of significance in there. You know, it's just like there's always a cost. Nothing's free. Knowledge isn't free. Yeah, wisdom isn't free. You earn it as you go along. Okay. Following on from that, there's the Mead of Poetry. It's one of my favourite stories in all the Eddas. Okay, but it's really complicated, right? It's not just a story. So first of all, let's break this down a little bit. Woden comes down to Midgard, dressed as a wanderer, and he's wandering along. Right, just happens to see, I think it's 7 workers in the field who've all the scythes are blunted, right, and they can't like cut the wheat down in time, and they've got to get it all done by the end of the day or whatever. And so Woden offers to sharpen one of the sickles for them, right? Which he does, and it's just almost magical. It's whoa, whoa, whoa. So everybody suddenly wants a share of this. So Woden throws, because they're all arguing, just throws the whetstone in the air, sharpening stone, and as it comes down, in the melee to be the one to own it, they all kill each other with the sickles. Right, so this is 7 people that Woden has just caused the death of. Right, for on the face of it, it seems like for no reason, just a bit of amusement. However, let's backtrack. Why has Woden come to Earth? He's looking for the Mead of Poetry. So he's got an idea where it is, but he can't just walk up and ask for the Mead of Poetry. He's not going to get it from Thrassi. So, which is the giant that keeps it in 3 big cauldrons, blah blah blah, hidden in the mountain, and his Gidrodi's daughter's looking after them to stop anybody taking from them. So this is all actually part of Woden's plan. He comes along, blah blah blah. He lets them all kill themselves through greed. Okay, right. Then he goes up and he says, "Look, all your men are dead, but employ me, right, for my price, always a price, and I will go and do the work of all them 7 men, and just like that." And so obviously this is Thrassi's brother, the giant, I forget his name, and he's kind of thinking, he's got no chance I'll make any bet with him. So he agrees that he can have some of the Mead of Poetry, can have I think it's a sip out of each cauldron, 3 sips, something like that. But he doesn't get the permission from his brother Thrassi, who owns it, to be able to make this offer. Anyway, Woden goes off, finishes all the work that he's doing for the season, and then obviously turns up a payment. So when Thrassi's brother comes to him, he goes, "No way, I didn't make this deal. You made this deal. Make it go away." He's not having none of it. So obviously he's trying then to barter with, "Well, no, what about this, what about that?" But Woden just simply insists, right, this is the wager, this is what you pay. So they toddle off up to the cave, right, but they can't get in. So basically Woden makes him start drilling, right, I would have thought with some kind of hand drill, right, into the rock. Now twice he tells Woden he's finished, right, but instead of doing anything else, he blows in the hole. When he blows in the hole, dust comes back in the faces, which means he hasn't bored all the way through, because otherwise the dust had gone through. Anyway, on the 3rd attempt, Woden blows into the hole. No dust comes back at him, so quick as lightning, turns himself into a snake and slithers through the hole, and the giant tries to get him, like putting the auger in behind him, but misses. So straight away, we've now got a god who's transformed himself into the guise of the Wanderer, come to Earth, followed this battle plan, knowing all the time he's going to be deceived, right, and then he shapeshifts in an instant to a serpent and goes into the hole. Right. Some people say that that's kind of a reference to Jungian sex magic, it's a hole being drilled and the snake going in. You think what you want about that. It's his way of accessing the inner sanctum where Gerod is looking after the mead, and obviously she's not going to let Odin just have the mead. So he seduces her, sleeps with her 3 nights, then she agrees. But what he does, turns himself into a massive eagle and like, drinks all the mead, holds it in his mouth and flies off. Right? How he fits back out of the cave, it doesn't really make it clear. Frassi, in his anger, obviously turns into I don't know, the Odin hawk, he's an eagle, whatever. A big man is flying after him, chasing him, and all this time bits of mead are spilling out, and man gets a drop. So that's where poetry comes from, and eloquent words, and the dwarves got some, and blah blah blah, which kind of explains then how other beings have runes other than just the gods. And then, as Woden flies over the wall, they've built a big pyre, and as Thrassi flies over, they set it on fire and burn him to death, right? And that leads on to another story, which is about Skadu or Skade, but we'll come back to that another time maybe, because that's the daughter, the goddess daughter of Thrassi. And so that's how Woden very quickly, as a can, wins the mead of poetry. But again, it's just like, is he a murderer? Because he lets them kill themselves. He didn't actually kill them. You want it? Have it. Boom. Greed kills them. Right? But it's certainly, he brings that justice about for greed, doesn't he? Then he makes a wager, and then he demands a wager is fulfilled, right? Always knowing that he intends to steal it all. He's going to take it. It doesn't belong to him. It does not belong to him, does it? Right? And it's mixed with Casvia's blood and all this kind of stuff. So it's really powerful stuff. And then he's getting chased, right? And the only reason he can't defend himself against this giant, basically, is because he's in bird form and his mouth's full of mead. He's trying not to spill too much of it. Thunor had not just stood on the wall and thrown his hammer and taken the bird down. It begs the question why it becomes so complicated, but that's storytelling, isn't it? It's like, well, does that mean that's more exciting than just throwing his hammer, what we know we can do at a giant? Yeah. And then obviously all the Asgardians come to save him, but there's consequences at a later date about this. So that's the mead of poetry. It goes from the whetstone incidents to the drilling where shape-shifting comes into it. It doesn't mention him using runes or anything, it just mentions it, he shifts his shape. Then the seduction of Geirrod, his escape, the spilling of the mead, and then obviously the death of Thrassi, and which I've mentioned is Skedu or Skedy's father, and that does become relevant in other myths. Okay, what I'm going to bring this round to now is a figure that we don't really we don't definitely find an equivalent of in Anglo-Saxon myth. There's some possibilities there. I'm not going to go into them because they're not there at the moment. But Loki. Now, love him or hate him, Loki, without Loki, let's be honest, the myths would be quite boring a lot of the time and pretty much non-existent, because between Loki's associations with Heimdall, Freya, Thunor, Frigg, and Woden, that half of the stories wouldn't even be there because he features in them really, really greatly. So I'm not going to go into Loki today, but at some point I'm going to come back to Loki, and this is why, because when Odin is up on the tree, he says, I took the rooms, then I fell back from there. Not I cut myself down. I fell back from there. So someone else has cut the thread and he's fallen back to earth. And I've got a book, an old book on my old Kindle that I can still access. I forgot what it's called now. We're part of a series of books about Loki, and it suggests that it was Loki that came along and cut Odin down from his sacrifice. Hence the reason they became blood brothers in the first place. Because why else would Woden have any reason to become a blood brother of a giant, a fire giant? And it becomes really, really important as this goes along, because to understand Odin, you have to understand Loki a little bit, and vice versa, because they are it's almost like Loki is the naughty side of Odin because he can get away with it. And if you buy into the theory of gods having different aspects, then Loki could just be another aspect of Odin. It's something I've come across before. Kind of doesn't offend me, but I don't sit with it. I like to see the deities as different deities. But what Loki does bring about is lots of mischief, but he does a lot of good for the gods, right? But he's very mistreated, which is why we'll come back to Loki, because I think he kind of that mistreated in end is why he goes down the dark road that he does. But again, Woden already knew all this because it was all to bring about Ragnarok, which he was fighting not to have. Ragnarok is something we will do properly separately as well. But this brings about another thing that I want to mention today before we disappear. Because sometimes understanding myths can be quite hard. And you get different kind of myths. You get some that just seem like it's a story, right? Then you get some that are like argumentative, and then you get some that are like battles of will and knowledge. Yeah. So the word Senna. Okay. The first time that Senna comes into the myth is in the Lay of Habad, where Woden is the ferryman and Thunor, who should be big enough to just like stomp through this lake, comes to this lake, can't get across it, and calls the ferryman, who then starts insulting him, and a war of words carries on. Right, this is a Senna, right, which is basically a battle of wills via verbal argument with threats of violence, but a Senna doesn't necessarily lead to violence. So, to understand Senna, I would highly recommend these two books. God in Flames, God in Fetters, Loki's Role in the Northern Religions. Okay, try and get your ISBN for that in case you're interested. I've had these books a lot of years. I don't even know if this is still in print now. And then The Trial of Loki, a study in Nordic heathen morality by Alan James. Okay, I'll try and get your ISBN of that one. Right, these, until I read these, I didn't know what I said about. Right, and these are books I keep coming back to and reading again. Because again, sometimes you can't look at a myth as a separate myth. You have to look at it as a myth cycle. So, let's look at the gods. They want to have a big feast. They need a hall big enough for everybody. And so, they ask Aegir to host it under the sea in his hall. And Aegir says, well, I will, but I ain't got a kettle big enough to brew all the mead. Right? Can you get them? So, this then begins another journey completely, because Tyr or Tyr and Thunor go off together. This is very rare to see these two gods together, but they go off together to collect these big kettles from Tyr's father, who was a giant. As part of this, it leads to the story of them all trembling in a cave all night with the noise of thunder outside. It turns out to, it goes on and on anyway. Right, but the main thing is, right, they get to Tyr's father's hall. He's not there. They go in, his giant mother welcomes them, blah, 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 blah. Tell her what they want, and he's coming back, so they have to hide. Even Tyr has to hide from his father because of his wrath. And he comes in anyway, and realises when they're there, there's a big squabble goes on, and basically Tyr's father ends up getting ended by Thunor, via the help of Tyr's mum, who tells Thunor how to win the battle that's going on by throwing the thing at his head to break it, the tankard. So then they get away with this big cauldron and they take it, and so that's going to be used to brew. Now, in between this, Loki has already been blamed for the death of Balder, which he didn't do. I'll never accept that myth. It's wrong. There's lots of proof out there that it's wrong, even in if you read the stories properly. right? However, he's taking the blame, so obviously Loki's already kind of outcast from the realm of the gods at the moment anyway, right? Hence, he's not invited to the Hall of Aegir. Now, the trial of Loki, as it's called in this, it's a lot of it's based around the feast at Aegir's Hall, because Loki's not invited. So the first time the feast starts, Thunor's not there at the beginning. So Loki rocks up. Yeah, I want to come in, and the guards aren't going to let him. So he kills 2 guards and he runs away. So obviously everyone's furious with Loki, right? But he still comes back later and he walks in the hall, and straight away it's like listening to these fools in the Houses of Parliament, and he goes arguing with them, and all like, and he says, well, hang on, did you not make a pledge to me, Odin, that you would never raise a horn without offering me one? So he's kind of got Odin by the tentacles, or so it seems, right? So Odin agrees, yep, we're blood brothers. I said I'd never drink in your presence without offering you hospitality, kind of thing. So Loki is brought in to the feast. With everything that's gone on, Odin could have just said, kill him, capture him. No, you're not welcome. My oath doesn't stand because you've killed my son. There's a million things that Odin could have said, but he doesn't say it. He lets Loki stay. So Loki's getting pissed. And more and more and more, he starts insulting each god and goddess. And some of them argue back to him. This is the Senna. It's like, Loki throws this, someone throws this. Loki throws that, someone throws that. The only one it appears not to actually totally slag off is Frigg. But obviously, he doesn't do what she's requesting either, because Frigg is trying to like calm him down and everything, and he's calling Freya this and that and other, accusing her of sleeping with even himself and everything. And then him and Odin get into it and starting accusing each other of unmanly acts, because Odin has practiced seed magic, which is working with females in their witchcraft, and Loki shape-shifts into a female mare and gets pregnant and bears Sleipnir, which becomes Woden's horse. So it's kind of classed as unmanly acts in this story. Okay, read the story. It's not me making this up. It's in the story. Right, and so finally, it's getting down to it now where it's like Thor comes, right, and he starts to argue with Thor, but basically, I think it's 3 times Thor warns him that it's going to end in him smacking him with his hammer and killing him, basically, if he doesn't sod off. So finally Loki does one, and the Senna comes to an end. And the big thing about Lokasenna is that is finally, it's after that the gods decide it's time to go after Loki, and he becomes a salmon, and they fish him out with a net, because and he's imprisoned and blah blah blah. And we're further going to the cycle of Ragnarok at that point in time. So Lokasenna is massive. If you've never read it, I suggest you read it properly. There's loads of versions of it. You can just get it free on the internet if you don't want to buy a book. It's not hard to get a free PDF of most stuff these days if you have a look around. I think next time we'll look at maybe a couple more stories with Odin in them, but start digressing. Or next week, if I don't do that, I will literally go into Woden and Loki and my true thoughts about stuff like that, and then some other things like maybe Woden and the Vanir and how they call the truth. So there's a couple of big stories in there that I still want to cover before moving on from it just being about Woden and moving on to other subjects. It's a bit of a long one today, folks. I'm sorry, it's nearly 25 minutes, so you can always watch it in bits. You don't have to watch it all at once. You don't have to watch it. If you do, hope you find it interesting. Hope it gives you food for thought and makes you hungry to go out there and find out for yourselves a little bit more, rather than just listening to me rambling on, because what do I know after 40 years? Take care. Stay safe out there in Warden's Keep.